Okay, thank you for the introduction, Abby, and thank you all for being here today. A special thanks to the Gies digital media team for hosting me here in one of our brand new broadcast studios in Weimer Hall. It's always energizing to present at a conference like this with people that are shaping how organizations show up in the world, whether you think about it in terms of websites, platforms, content, or digital experiences. What you all do sits right at the intersection of technology and people, and that's an interesting place to live. Because the technology side of that equation is moving fast, faster than it ever has. Tools change, platforms evolve, expectations shift almost overnight. The introduction of AI is a seismic disruption. But the people side, that part moves a little differently. And the longer I've been doing this work, the more I've come to believe that the way we show up as leaders, especially through times of intense change, is what determines whether technology enables progress or creates friction. A moment of transparency here. I'm one of the lead facilitators for the IT Leadership Workshop at the University of Illinois. During last summer's program, I did what's called a step-in, where I shared my views about integrity and leadership for all of 3 minutes. My words landed so deeply in one of the cohort members, who happens to be on the WebCon planning committee, that she recommended me for this keynote. And I'm overjoyed for the opportunity to expand those thoughts today. The title of this talk is Leading with Integrity from the Inside Out. And what I want to do is walk through 3 ideas that continue to shape my own leadership journey here at Illinois. Not the tools, not the platforms, not even the strategies, but how we lead when everything around us is changing. Those ideas are authenticity, honesty, and a people-first mindset. They're the values that guide me, not as abstract concepts, but as lived experiences. They're the things that I've learned slowly and sometimes the hard way, sometimes through feedback that I didn't expect or didn't particularly enjoy hearing in the moment. Before I get into those ideas, I want to take a minute and rewind a little bit. I came to Champaign-Urbana in 1993 with a political science degree and not a whole lot of clarity about what came next. Like a lot of people at that stage, I was trying to figure things out as I went. I signed up for extra help on campus and ended up working on a strategic planning effort. One day, walking through the main library, I saw something on a computer screen that I'd never seen before. It was Mosaic, the first graphical web browser that was developed here at Illinois. And I remember stopping and clicking through links and watching text-based pages load, realizing that information could be connected in this completely new way. I got really curious. I started learning HTML. I went back to the people I was working with in Extension with more enthusiasm than experience and said, we should be doing something with this. And to their credit, they didn't say, you're 22, what do you know? They said, go ahead. That moment turned into a career. I spent nearly 2 decades building websites and applications for Illinois Extension, helping deliver knowledge out into the world. I loved the work. I was good at it. In my time as a web developer, our sites had more than 1 billion page views. Giving this keynote is kind of a full circle moment for me. I was on the original Webmasters Committee and helped give life to the Webmasters Forum that eventually evolved into WebCon. I even spread the good news of WebCon across the country. I was on vacation in Newport, Rhode Island more than a decade ago, and a team from Lagunitas Brewing was there as sponsors of the Newport Folk Festival. I asked one of the guys if they had any extra t-shirts. They didn't, but he offered me the one off his back if I'd give him the WebCon t-shirt that I was wearing. That was a done deal. In retrospect, that was my all-time favorite WebCon design, so I'm not sure swapping was my best decision ever. What was a good decision was the pivot I took into leadership after nearly 20 years as a developer. The technology was evolving, and I wasn't sure if I was evolving in the same way. At the same time, opportunities started to open up on the leadership side. And I'll be honest, I did not feel ready. I went from writing my last lines of code on May 15th, 2012, to leading all of IT for Extension on May 16th. This was a stretch of my career that I've described as leadership by the seat of my pants, where I was making decisions, having some success, making some mistakes, and quietly hoping that no one would realize how much I was figuring it out as I went. But during that time, something started to become clear. The difference between when things worked and when they didn't wasn't just about the quality of the ideas. It was about the consistency in how I showed up. That's integrity. Integrity is holding your values firmly, aligning your behavior with them, and acting on them consistently. You can have the greatest ideas in the world, but your integrity is the platform through which you deliver them successfully. That realization is what started to shape everything I'm going to talk about today. In 2015, a few years after my first official leadership position, I decided to get this tattoo. I'm not sure I saw it specifically as a symbol of integrity when it was first inked into my skin. I'm kind of a botanical nerd, and I love the idea of having a tree silhouette. But it's come to remind me of my values, the things that are so important to me that they stay with me all the time, no matter life's context. The trunk and the branches of a tree will grow and evolve, but they never disappear, even in periods of quiet dormancy. Those values, authenticity, honesty, and being people-centered, are what guide me as a leader. So let's start with authenticity. Authenticity is one of those words that shows up everywhere. It sounds good, it feels right, but it can get a little fuzzy if we don't anchor it in something real. For me, authenticity showed up when I realized I actually wasn't as authentic as I thought I was. There was a moment in my career where I received feedback that caught me completely off guard. Somebody told me that I was intimidating. And that didn't make any sense at first. I didn't feel intimidating. I felt like someone who still carried a fair amount of self-doubt and someone who was working hard to prove that I belonged. But feedback has a way of sticking with you. And the more I thought about it, the more I started to see what they were seeing. I had created a version of myself that I thought leadership required. The composed version, the confident version, the version that has answers. And that version worked to a point. It helped me move things forward. It helped me gain credibility. It helped me feel like I belonged in rooms where I wasn't always sure I did. But it also created distance. When you consistently show up as someone who appears to have everything figured out, you unintentionally signal that there isn't much room for anything else. There isn't much room for uncertainty. There isn't much room for challenge. There isn't much room for someone else to shape the direction. And over time, people respond to that. They start to hold back. They hesitate. They engage a little less. Not because they don't care, but because they don't feel like there's space. And that's when authenticity started to shift for me. It became less about being yourself and more about being vulnerable and accessible. Letting people see that I didn't have everything figured out. Letting them see where I was still learning. Letting them see where their input actually mattered. And I won't pretend that it was easy. There's a certain comfort in having it all together, a predictability, a sense of control. But what I found on the other side of that shift was something more valuable, connection and contribution. When people feel like they can connect with you as a real person, everything changes. Conversations get better, trust builds faster, collaboration becomes easier. Maybe most importantly, people start to bring more of themselves into the work. They can see themselves as collaborators in shared success. It's not about my success, it's about our success. It's not about everyone hiding behind armor. Organizational researcher Brene Brown talks about when leaders are armored, it creates cultures that reward and require armor. Bringing our authentic selves as leaders, weaknesses and all, allow others to drop their armor and truly connect in collaborative ways. Harvard researcher Amy Edmondson brings a different angle on the importance of authenticity when she talks about psychological safety in the workplace, defining it as being able to speak up without fear. A leader sets the tone for this through their own behavior and how they reward or punish risk-taking. When we as leaders authentically admit our own challenges and failings, it sets an example and allows our colleagues to follow suit. Showing up authentically, warts, weaknesses and all, sets the tone that permeates through the workplace. Authenticity is contagious, and that's when teams really start to unlock something. A word of caution here. There's a lot of talk about authenticity out there that screams, this is who I am, unapologetically, all the time, deal with it. I think this is a dangerous and almost reckless message because how we show up has context. Who we are isn't static. We show up in different ways in different environments. we have the ability to grow and change who we are. Being authentic requires us to be 100% ourselves. It does not require us to be 100% of ourselves 100% of the time. We bring different versions of our authentic selves to different venues in our lives, as we should. This is not camouflage, but instead an intentional revealing of ourselves in appropriate moments. Being authentic does not give us a pass on personal growth. Our authentic selves should constantly evolve and be open to improvement. Being authentic requires a great deal of reflection and mapping our journey from who we are to who we want to be. It's okay, and often preferred, to realize along the way that we want to change who we are and pivot accordingly. Authenticity sets the foundation for something else that matters just as much: honesty. But not just honesty in the sense of telling the truth. Honesty in the sense of seeing clearly. Seeing what's actually happening, not what we hope is happening, not what we've convinced ourselves is happening, but what's real. There's a story from my childhood that's stuck with me for decades. Some of you may have heard me talk about this in the past. I was helping my grandfather cut the grass. The lawnmower broke, so we borrowed one from the neighbor. I finished the job and started to return it. And my grandfather stopped me. He looked at the mower and said, where are you going with that? I said, I'm returning it. And he said, it's filthy. Clean it before you take it back. I pushed back. I said, it was dirty when we got it. And he looked at me and said, when you borrow something, you return it better. And that idea has really stayed with me, because it's not just about doing the minimum. It's about taking ownership. It's about leaving something better than you found it. And to do that, you have to be honest about where things actually are. You have to face reality. In leadership, that shows up in uncomfortable ways. It shows up when something you've invested in isn't working. It shows up when feedback doesn't match how you see yourself. It shows up when the approaches that have always worked just stop working. I had one of those moments during a period of growth and change in our organization. I'd always placed great value on being involved and available in all the corners of my team's activities. But we've grown to a size where that's impossible. I simply can't know everything we're doing without sacrificing my strategic focus for the sake of the weeds. I can't be there for everyone in my organization when they might need me. I have to trust the other managers to pay attention to their own teams and surface the right amount of information to me. I've been leaning into the leadership approaches that had always worked for me. I doubled down on them, and we didn't get the results we needed. Not because those approaches were bad, but because the context had changed. And I had to be honest enough to say, this isn't working. But here's the part I didn't fully understand earlier in my career. That honesty can't stay internal. It has to be shared. It has to be transparent. Because if you're the only one who sees reality clearly, your team is still operating in the dark. Transparency is what turns honesty into something useful. It gives people a clear understanding of what's actually happening. And I'll be honest, transparency can feel risky. There's a natural instinct to hold things back, to wait until everything is fully formed, to avoid showing uncertainty. But when we hold too much back, people don't just wait, they fill in the gaps. And what fills in those gaps is often worse than reality. Assumptions, misalignment, distrust. It was truly frightening to stand up in front of my team and say we were falling behind. It was even more frightening to admit that I wasn't sure what path would lead us back to productivity. So we asked the team what they needed. We created a space where they could be honest about what was working and what wasn't working, where they could identify what would make them successful. Overwhelmingly, they said they needed clarity in the form of prioritization, roles and responsibilities, and process. And we weren't doing a great job in any of those areas. And we had to admit that. Admitting where we were falling behind didn't fix the problems, but it clarified our path forward. Transparency doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it replaces ambiguity with clarity. It says, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, and here's what we're working through. It creates alignment. I remember making the shift from just knowing we needed to adjust to actually saying out loud, to my leadership team, to the broader organization, saying, we need to change how we're approaching this. That didn't weaken anything. It created trust because people understood what was happening and where they fit into it. Transparency invites people in. It turns leadership into something shared. Honesty is more than just acknowledging your reality out loud. Honesty requires that we lean into the uncomfortable conversations when people aren't aligned with our organizational objectives or are exhibiting behaviors that are detrimental to the team. There's this thing called Midwest Nice. If you haven't heard of it, it's a tendency of folks in Middle America to avoid directness when it involves disagreement. We'll dance around an issue all day, all dressed up in politeness. Midwest Nice is not quite the opposite of honesty, but it cloaks honesty in a multi-layered avoidance that can border on passive-aggressive behavior. I grew up on the East Coast, right outside of New York City. If you're unfamiliar with the culture out there, it is not Midwest Nice. You could argue it's downright aggressive. When I arrived in Champaign-Urbana in 1993, I kept wondering why no one was directly saying what they thought, especially in group settings. Everyone would be agreeable in a meeting and then spend the next 2 hours complaining about what went on in the meeting. It happened all the time. That's Midwest Nice in action. To break out of Midwest Nice and bring honesty back into clear view, we have to learn the art of compassionate directness. Directness and kindness are not enemies. I'll repeat that because I think it's really important. Directness and kindness are not enemies. When we combine the two, we're able to speak hard, honest truths while still valuing and respecting the recipients of our directness. This is the only way we break through the complex organizational challenges and interpersonal conflict, by being honest with each other in a spirit of openness and collaborative problem solving. Great leaders are honest with their teams, and great teams are honest with each other. Research supports this notion. A 2019 dissertation by Carrie Nelson found that employees who experience psychological safety, candor, and civility have the most positive workplace experiences. In 2024, Bankel Williams found that psychological safety makes it possible a culture of radical candor, resulting in higher productivity and personal satisfaction. A third way that honesty underpins success as a leader in organizations is through building a culture of feedback. We're gonna make mistakes. We're going to upset each other. That is just part of being human. Building a culture of feedback where colleagues can safely provide constructive feedback to you as the leader and to each other as peers is critical. In the IT Leadership Workshop, we talk about feedback as a gift, to be given and to be received. When we frame feedback like this, it allows us to remove the knee-jerk defensiveness we often feel when criticized. It encourages us to seek out the feedback of others so we can improve. And it reminds us that we should always frame the feedback we give as something to help improve, not condemn. As leaders, valuing honesty means seeking candid feedback even when it doesn't align with how we see ourselves. There will be some feedback that you receive that doesn't make any sense at all. What you do with feedback is up to you, but I encourage you to find the kernel of truth in it. When I received feedback that I was intimidating, my first reaction was internal defensiveness. I thought to myself, what? I'm not intimidating. You're just not used to being around someone with confidence. But once I was able to get some distance from the feedback, I saw the kernel of truth in it. I was acting confident everywhere, even in places where I wasn't, and that made me inaccessible. This is the most challenging thing about honesty because it involves looking in the mirror and finding both affirmation and opportunities for growth. I think most leaders, me included, struggle to find affirmation when alone in the mirror. When we drop all the masks and shields and we see all the things we could be doing better, all the mistakes we've made, and all the fears we have of failure. Our first posture in the mirror should always be one of grace. We cannot find our true growth in the avalanche of opportunities without first being compassionate to ourselves over our failings and fears. They're natural. They'll always be there. The trick is to find those things where improvement is possible and will have an impact of being honest with ourselves and when asking these questions. What can I realistically change about myself? What difference will it make if I do? The answers to these questions can focus your motivation for improvement. Here's an example. Every personality type assessment I've ever taken, the place where I score the lowest is in execution. I rank high in strategic thinking, influence, and relationship building, but execution always comes in last. It doesn't mean I'm bad at execution. It just means I'm not best suited to be the person who's going to get an idea to the finish line. Knowing this about myself and being honest about it helps me when choosing roles and responsibilities, as well as who makes up the team around me. I can come up with ideas, sell those ideas, get people on board, but I need a strong team of doers to bring the idea to reality. I know that about myself and make decisions accordingly. That's just being honest. Let's wrap up honesty by reviewing how it shows up in leadership for me. As transparency and clarity, as compassionate directness, as feedback, and as awareness and acceptance of self. So we have authenticity and honesty as two significant pillars in my integrity. The third is acting with a people-first mindset. This is the one that took me the longest to really understand. Because for a long time, my work was centered around me. My ideas, my aspiration, my progress, my success. Not in a way that I would have called entirely selfish, but in a way that still put me at the center. And over time, that shifted because the most meaningful moments in my career weren't the ones where I succeeded individually. They were the ones where something bigger happened. Leadership isn't about us. It's about what happens around us, and that changes everything. You listen differently, you create space differently, you define success differently. We all hopefully come to this place where we realize that it's not about us. This comes at different times for different people. Early in our careers, we can be very centered on our own success and aspiration. That's completely natural and often necessary. We have to establish ourselves as valuable members of our work community. We have to find our own financial security through work. But this self-focused era of our careers comes to an end if we're lucky enough to see the benefits. In my experience, it took the feedback that I mentioned earlier to wake me up. It shook me. I clearly saw that my path wasn't the one I wanted to take. And that's a tough thing to see. Once you see it, you have a choice. You can keep going the same way, or you can adjust. A people-first mindset required that adjustment for me. It required me to ask, who else needs to be heard? What space am I taking up that someone else could fill? Am I creating an environment where others can lead? Where are the pain points for this team? Because leadership isn't something you hold. It's something where you create space for others. And when people feel that space, when they feel invited, seen, heard, valued, they show up differently. They invest, they contribute, they grow, they also lead. And that's where real impact happens. Being people-centered is my home as a leader. I felt that most acutely over the past couple of years as our organization has grown beyond a size where I can have direct, continued interaction and impact with everyone on our team. That's been hard for me to wrap my head and heart around. This reality has me truly questioning how I want to spend what is probably the last decade of my career. 11 years ago, I had someone influential in my life tell me that he said, "You're going to be a Research One CIO someday." And that aspiration has stuck with me ever since. But recently, I've been asking if I really want it. I've had a chance to witness many campus CIOs over the years, and the job is consumed by managing relationships with campus leadership and prominent faculty and strategic decisions over the central IT organization. Most of them have genuinely cared about the people in their organizations, but the demands of the job leave little time to lean in to helping them grow. They mostly deal with other senior leaders rather than folks in earlier stages of their careers. And it's really hard for me to see myself loving that role more than I love my current role because that's still squarely focused on helping people grow and thrive. Integrity has a funny way of reminding you where your home is. We find ourselves entertaining the idea of change, And then we must first ask if our new environment will continue to support our values. One of the keys to maintaining your integrity is putting yourself in situations that align with your values. Otherwise, it's just a constant battle to uphold them. Years ago, I had the opportunity to move into a senior leadership role under a previous CIO. I turned it down because their values didn't align with mine. I felt like I'd be continually asked to do things that violated my values and compromised my integrity. It was an easy answer, despite the elevation in titles and responsibility. When you bring all of this together, authenticity, honesty, and a people-first mindset, you get a different kind of leadership. It's not louder, it's not more visible, but it is more effective because it's grounded in trust. And I think that matters more now than ever because the tools keep changing, the platforms will keep evolving, but the way we show up, that's what determines whether or not any of it actually works. I'll leave you with this. Leadership isn't built in big moments. It's built in small ones. The conversations that no one else hears, the decisions that no one notices, the moments where it'd be easier to take the shortcut. Those moments don't feel significant, but they add up and they shape how people experience you. They shape how people trust you and they shape how people follow you. Every one of you has the ability to lead in these moments. Not because of your title, not because of but because of how you show up. That's where integrity lives. That's where it's built from the inside out.